In January 2026, silver crossed $90 per ounce for the first time in human history. And if you think that's because some Reddit traders got bored with GameStop, you've missed the entire point. This isn't a bubble. This is gravity finally reasserting itself after 150 years of financial engineering tried to convince the world that you can build an economy on promises instead of atoms. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You can print 38 trillion in a national debt. You can create Bitcoin out of cryptographic prayer. You can conjure derivatives that are 8 times larger than global GDP. But you cannot. No matter how clever your Excel spreadsheet, you cannot manufacture a single additional atom of silver when the solar panel factory runs out. And right now, in 2026, the factory is running out. This is the story of how the world spent a century and a half trying to divorce money from physical reality, and why that divorce is ending not with a whimper, but with a scramble for the metal they told us didn't matter anymore. Because it turns out that when you need to build the future, when you need batteries, solar cells, AI server racks, and yes, even weapons, the market doesn't accept credit default swaps as payment. It wants the metal. To understand why silver is at $90 today, you need to understand what happened in 1873. Picture the late 19th century. The world is industrializing. Railroads are devouring continents. Banks are multiplying like rabbits. And there's a problem. There isn't enough gold. For centuries, both gold and silver had been real money. You could walk into a bank with silver coins, and they meant something. Governments minted them. Debts were settled with them. The ratio between gold and silver was fixed by law, usually around 15-1 or 16-1. But as the British Empire tightened its grip on global finance, a quiet decision was made. Gold would be the only serious money. Silver would be demoted. In 1873, the United States Congress passed what critics later called the Crime of 1873, a bureaucratic document that quietly removed silver from the list of metals that could be freely coined into money. It didn't make headlines. There were no riots, just a legislative footnote. But the effect was tectonic. Overnight, silver became the other metal, the one that wasn't quite money anymore. The one that farmers held but banks didn't trust. The pile of silver sitting in the vaults didn't lose its weight, it still gleamed the same, but the words written on the ledger next to it had changed. And here's the mechanism. When you remove a metal from the monetary standard, you don't destroy its value. You just transfer the perception of value to a smaller circle. Gold became the anchor. Silver became the speculation. The farmers who had borrowed in dollars when silver was still money now had to pay back those debts in a currency backed only by the scarcer gold. The rope tightened quietly, and the debtors choked. By the 1890s, silver had been cast out of the money system in most of the Western world. And for the next several decades, it wandered in the wilderness valuable, yes, but not chosen. Fast forward to 1934. The Great Depression is grinding America into dust. The stock market has collapsed. Banks have failed. Unemployment is approaching 25%, and the national debt is ballooning at a rate that makes contemporary politicians sweat through their wool suits. Enter President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his Treasury Secretary, Henry Morgenthau Jr. These men are not idiots. They understand something critical. In a crisis, paper promises are only as good as the willingness of people to believe in them. And in 1934, that belief is evaporating, so they make a move. The Silver Purchase Act of 1934 is passed. On the surface, it's framed as a SOP to Western mining states, a way to prop up silver prices and help struggling miners. But read the fine print, and you see something else entirely. The U.S. government begins buying silver, aggressively, relentlessly. The goal, stated in bureaucratic language, is to increase the proportion of silver in the monetary reserves until it constitutes 1/4 of the total monetary stock. Think about that. In the middle of a financial catastrophe, when the government is hemorrhaging money, they decide the solution is to accumulate a physical metal. Not because it's fashionable, because it's foundational. The mechanism is elegant. By purchasing silver and holding it in reserve, the Treasury creates a floor under the entire monetary system. It's not backing the dollar with silver in the old 19th century way that ship has sailed, but it's building a physical anchor in the vault, a weight at the bottom of the ledger. And here's the dark genius of it. When you're the government and you print the currency, you can buy a strategic asset with money that didn't exist yesterday and hold it forever. The pile of silver in the treasury vaults grows heavier, and the bankers sleep a little easier, knowing that somewhere beneath the paper there is metal. 1942. The United States is now fully committed to World War II, but there's another war being waged: the race to build the atomic bomb. The Manhattan Project is the most expensive scientific endeavor in human history. Laboratories are being constructed in the desert. Physicists are being recruited from universities. And deep in those laboratories, they encounter a problem. To enrich uranium, you need massive electromagnetic separators machines called calutrons. And calutrons require enormous amounts of electrical wiring to generate the magnetic fields necessary to split isotopes. Copper would be the obvious choice. But there's a problem. Copper is already being consumed by the war effort at a catastrophic rate. Every tank, every plane, every radio, every shell casing, they all need copper. So the scientists go to the Treasury and ask a question that sounds insane. Can we borrow your silver? And the Treasury, after a moment of bureaucratic shock, says yes. Between 1942 and 1945, the U.S. government lends 14,000 tons of silver from its reserves to the Manhattan Project. Not silver coins, not certificates. Physical bars of metal, transported under armed guard, melted down and wound into coils inside the calutron magnets. Think about the symbolism. When the survival of the nation is at stake, when you need to build the weapon that will end the war, you don't reach for a bond. You don't reach for a dollar bill. You reach for the metal. The silver sits in those coils, conducting electricity, generating magnetic fields, separating uranium-235 from uranium-238, atom by atom. And when the bombs are finally built, when Hiroshima and Nagasaki are erased from the map, the silver is carefully recovered, melted down again, and returned to the treasury vaults. Not a single ounce is lost, because silver, unlike promises, is accountable. This is the moment the world should have learned the lesson. In extremis, the only currency that matters is the one you can weigh. But, of course, we didn't learn. Let's jump to 1979. By now, silver has been fully expelled from the monetary system. The last silver certificates were redeemed in 1968. The coins have been replaced with copper-nickel slugs. Silver is just a commodity now, something traded on exchanges, used in photography and industry, but not money in any official sense. Except two brothers from Texas don't believe that story. Nelson Bunker Hunt and William Herbert Hunt are oil billionaires, and they look at the world in 1979, rampant inflation, collapsing trust in the dollar, gold soaring past $800 an ounce, and they see an opportunity. They start buying silver. Not a little, a lot. By 1980, the Hunt brothers and their associates control an estimated 100 million ounces of physical silver, roughly half the global supply available for trading. They're not speculating. They're cornering the market, and it works. In January 1979, silver trades at $6 per ounce. By January 1980, it hits $50. The price doesn't rise, it erupts. Suddenly, people are melting down their grandmother's silverware to sell for scrap. Refineries can't keep up with the flood of metal. The Hunt brothers are sitting on a mountain of bullion worth billions. And the world is watching in horror as the entire industrial silver market threatens to collapse. Because here's the problem. When you corner a physical commodity, you're not just affecting the price on a chart. You're affecting every factory, every film developer, every electronics manufacturer who needs that metal to function. The Hunts have turned silver from a commodity into a hostage. So the exchange does what exchanges always do when the game stops going their way. They change the rules. On January 21, 1980, the COMEX and the Chicago Board of Trade announced new trading restrictions. Silver Rule 7. Effective immediately, traders can only liquidate positions, not establish new ones. You can sell, but you cannot buy. The effect is instant. With no new buyers allowed, the price collapses. Silver falls from $50 to $11 in a matter of weeks. The Hunt brothers, leveraged to the hilt, face margin calls they cannot meet. Their empire crumbles. Bankruptcy, lawsuits, ruin. But here's what they proved. The market for physical assets is not a free market when those assets become too valuable. When demand for the metal itself threatens the paper system built on top of it, the paper system will protect itself. The price can be managed, the rules can be bent. But the metal, 14,000 tons in a vault, 100 million ounces in a warehouse. The metal doesn't care what the rule book says. It just sits there, waiting. Which brings us to today, January 2026. Silver's at $90 per ounce, and this time, the Hunt brothers aren't driving it. The solar industry is. The electric vehicle manufacturers are. The AI server farms, which require silver-lined circuits to handle the electrical loads of training models that will replace human cognition, are driving it. In 2025 alone, global solar panel installations consumed more silver than the entire Hunt brothers hoard, and the projections for 2026 even higher. Every solar panel requires about 20 grams of silver. The world is installing solar capacity at a rate of 400 plus gigawatts per year now. Do the math. That's roughly 8,000 tons of silver annually just for solar. Add EVs, add 5G infrastructure, add AI data centers, add the military-industrial complex, which never stopped needing silver for missile guidance systems and advanced electronics. And then ask yourself, where is that silver coming from? Annual mine production is roughly 25,000 tons. Sounds like a lot, until you realize that industrial demand is now consuming over 60% of that, and the gap is widening. For the first time in 150 years, the world is facing the finite problem. You can create $1 trillion in quantitative easing with a keystroke. The Federal Reserve added $5 trillion to its balance sheet between 2020 and 2022, and the number just appeared on a screen. But you cannot create silver. Every ounce in circulation today was either mined from the earth or recycled from old electronics. There is no substitute for it in high-efficiency solar cells. There is no alternative in certain medical applications. And when the military needs it for secure communications equipment, they don't accept zinc as a replacement. So the price rises, not because of speculation, not because of mania, because the physical world is finally sending an invoice to the digital one. And the invoice is denominated in atoms, not abstractions. Let's connect the dots. In 1873, silver was removed from the monetary system to centralize power in gold and eventually fiat currency. The message was clear. We don't need physical limits anymore. We can manage value with policy. In 1934, during the worst financial crisis in modern history, the government quietly began hoarding silver again, because deep down, they knew that paper needs a floor. In 1942, when the stakes were existential, they didn't reach for bonds or currency. They reached for 14,000 tons of metal to build the weapon that would win the war. In 1980, when private citizens tried to assert the value of that metal against the paper system, the rules were changed mid-game to protect the illusion. And now, in 2026, we're watching the final act. The green energy revolution, the thing every government on Earth claims to support, requires silver at a scale that makes the Hunt brothers look like hobbyists. The AI revolution, which is supposed to dematerialize everything, is actually rematerializing the economy at breakneck speed, because those server farms need physical materials to exist, and the supply is finite. This is the most cynical joke in financial history. We spent 150 years building an economic system based on the idea that we could abstract away from physical constraints, that we could financialize everything, that derivatives and debt and digital tokens could replace the inconvenient limitations of the physical world. And now, at the peak of that abstraction, we've discovered that the future we're trying to build, green, digital, sustainable, requires more of the metal we declared obsolete than any economy in history. The market is not wrong. Silver at $90 is not a bubble, it's a correction. A correction of 150 years of pretending that you can have an infinite economy on a finite planet. So here's what you need to understand. The price of silver is not just a number on a screen. It's a signal. Signal that the age of pure abstraction is ending. You can trade stocks that represent fractions of companies that might be profitable in a decade. You can buy tokens that represent membership in a decentralized autonomous organization that exists only in code. You can hold bonds issued by governments that are 38 trillion in debt. But when you need to build the solar panel that powers the grid, or the battery that moves the car, or the circuit that runs the AI, the market doesn't accept your tokens. It wants the metal, and there isn't enough of it. The cycle that began in 1873, the divorce of money from metal, is closing. Not because of ideology, because of physics. Silver doesn't care about your monetary policy. It doesn't care about the narrative. It doesn't inflate or split or get printed at 2% per year. It just is. And right now, in January 2026, the world is rediscovering that the most valuable things are the ones you cannot create with a keystroke. If you found this useful, subscribe. Because the lesson here isn't about silver. It's about the eternal truth that reality always wins. And reality is made of atoms, not promises.